everyone. It's the Intuitknit podcast. I'm Laura, your host. This is episode, I think it's 14 of my podcast. And if you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new to the podcast, I hope you enjoy it. This podcast is just about knitting, spinning, and some of the other things that I find interesting. And so I hope that you'll enjoy it too. We do have a group on Ravelry. I have to say I'm not really attentive to the group, and so you may find that there's not a lot of action on it, but that's okay. I'm fine with it. If you want to leave me a message on that thread, on that group on Ravelry, that would be great. So, how's everybody today? It's February day here. We've had quite an ice storm here, so it's been a matter of trying to keep your balance when you're on a flat surface out there. I tried to get my car down the driveway today, and it kind of was going sideways. So there you go. But hopefully on the weekend, I think it's going to get a little bit milder. So yeah, typical weather here in Ontario, Canada. So what can you do? I do like the seasons changing, so I can't complain very much. So we'll just get right into it. I'm going to show you a few things that I've completed and a few things that I've still got on the go, and just a little bit of babble about upcoming plans and things like that. So yeah, so on the last podcast, I think I mentioned that I was making a baby sweater, and this was a sweater that I was making for a family friend that had come at Christmas time. So it's just a roll neck sweater, quite soft, and it's just got a garter hem on it. But what I'm going to do is get someone who knows how to crochet to crochet a happy face on it. And if you don't know the story of that, go back to one of my previous podcasts, the one where it's I think it's December podcast. Yeah, so I don't podcast very much, but usually once a month you can find me here. So anyway, I finished this, and this should be quite fun to give to the baby's dad, because we enjoyed his company over Christmas. So the next thing I did show on my last podcast, half done, and this is the June Bunny shawl on Ravelry. It's a free pattern, but I finally got it completed, and it's all blocked out. So I thought that you might like to see the completed project. I think I had it on the needles last time I showed you. And I quite enjoyed this. It was a fairly easy pattern for me to do, given that I'm not, I got to say, I'm not an experienced lace knitter, and sometimes I do lose my way, so I'm challenged to go pick up stitches once I've misstepped the pattern. It's quite wide, so it's going to be a good size shawl. And I think I'm going to give it to my mom now that I've shown it here on the podcast. But I did want to show it completed. This is in the Knit Picks Hawthorne sock yarn, and it's in the color Belmont. So I was thinking I might try to find a pin that kind of picks up this bluish gray color to maybe give her also as an accent that she could wear it with. So yeah, it's so nice to get things off the needle, isn't it, once you've been laboring over them for a while. And it's such a wonderful thing to see them all blocked out, because the whole texture changes, doesn't it? And you can really see some of those stitch patterns. And if it's been a long time coming, it's such a reward to see it in its completion. So I'm really happy with that. A little bit of spinning that I finished. I think I maybe did show you last time some of the singles, but now I've spun up some of this lovely gray yarn. This is just merino yarn that I had dyed with sort of an unknown dye bath that I acquired at a yarn dyeing workshop where we used organic dyes or plant dyes. And I had taken away the brew that we had made, not really knowing what the contents were, and just experimented with it. And this was merino yarn that I had, my son had given me when I first started spinning, so I have quite a bit of it, but I haven't actually used it up. So I dyed it with some of this unknown brew that I had dyed up. And actually I love the variation on the grays. because there's almost a bit of pinkness also in the gray. And this one is a 2-ply as well, but I had used a spool that had actually come out darker in the spinning. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that. I think for this, because I have one more spool that I may do, and it has more of the dark color in it. What I may do is make one of those lovely shawls that I've seen on the Gentle Knitter podcast. She really is inspiring to me because of the pattern types that she chooses, and just her colors. She tends to use more grays and blues in her work, and the podcast is just such a lovely, calming podcast that it really draws you into using some of the neutrals, some of the quieter colors that nature provides. And yeah, it just really got me thinking about making a lovely, soft shawl in some of these great colors. So, and one of the shawls that she had made in her podcast was called this Lala's Simple Shawl. And it's just a series of yarn overs, I'm sure, and knit purl pattern. And I think it was a free pattern on Ravelry. I could be wrong, but it's designed by Laura Linneman. And so I think I might make my gray shawl in this one. So that will be up and coming. Seeing how that rolls out. Now, I did tell you the last podcast that I am going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival this year. I'm so excited, and I'm so thankful for anyone linking with me on Ravelry to say that they're also going. I'm hoping that I can meet up with people. I am traveling by myself, so I'm hoping that I can meet up with people that don't mind hanging out with me, and maybe go to some of the pub nights and such that are planned. There will be a podcaster meetup, and I'm hoping that I won't be overstepping myself because I don't have a huge following in my podcast, but it's very nice to be included in those sorts of gatherings, and I will appreciate it. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to join in with in the spirit of knitting with that local yarn is I'm going in the Blacker Yarn Cal. And so I'm starting to use the two colors of Blacker yarn, and I'll show you the yarn that I'm using. The pattern I'm using is off the Blacker Yarn website, and it's called the Autumn Leaves Slouchy Hat. And I have a black and white here. It's a free pattern, but you can't really appreciate it because the leaves actually go down the side of the hat. And I wasn't sure how I was going to incorporate two colors into my hat, so I've just begun knitting it up in this Blacker Classic British Wool 30% Blue Face Leicester DK yarn. It's 100% wool, of course, and so I'm using that, and I did want to incorporate this color choice as well in the hat. But I wasn't sure about doing color work, how that would play out in the lace that I'm doing on the side of the hat. So I'm making my way up the hat, and I'm just doing the lace as it was written. It's all knitted flat, and then you sew up the sides later. So I've just begun now the lace motif. And I'm sure that there's not a long way that I'll have yet to go, because that's almost 5 inches now, and usually there's a 5-inch length when you knit a hat until you start the decreases. So I'm thinking that it'll be very soon that I'll be having my leaves up here, and then it'll be a matter of decreasing. Getting off on topic, but what I was thinking I might do is I might try to incorporate some of the leaf patterns as an over stitch using this yarn, because I really had looked at, this is actually the right side of the hat. Usually when you do a rib stitch of this kind, this would be the right side because it's a knit 3 purl 1 rib stitch, and usually that would be the right side, but on this hat this is actually the right side. And so what happens is these these knit stitches become the stems of the later leaves that appear on the side of the hat. And it got me thinking, these knit stitches, because on the Fibertown podcast, Emily had featured a book which was called Splendid Apparel, which I purchased, just seeing what beautiful things were in this. And this is written by Anna Zilberg. She did actually interview her on one of her podcasts, and it seemed so interesting, the things that she was talking about, that I thought, okay, well, I'll go out and buy that book. So I did. And what I'm noticing about the book is how in the book they do overstitching to complement some of the lace patterns. So I thought maybe what I could do is use the blue to, after the fact, go in and do some overstitching to feature some of the lines that are created by this lace stitching and stems in this case, and maybe even come up and do some overstitching to feature the leaves a little more prominently. So stay tuned, and I will show you on my next podcast how that works out for me. This is a cowl that will be completed, I think, March the 4th. And the Edinburgh Yarn Festival is the next weekend, I believe. So I'll have plenty of time to finish it and post it. But yeah, I thought that might be a really great project, because I'll be completing the requirements of the cowl, which is to use this beautiful Blacker yarn and one of their own patterns, and then also use a little bit of another technique that I haven't tried before, which is this embroidered technique on knits. So if you haven't seen this book, do take a look. Maybe you'll find that it's something that you'd like to do too. She's got some beautiful ideas in here, and she even uses beadwork in some cases to do some of the designs that she has. So you can see how the lace work is really almost enhanced by the colors that she's applied over top of the lace stitching. So it'll create a whole new world for me in terms of, well, when you think you've finished a project and it's kind of okay, but you maybe would like to add a little bit of pizzazz, maybe that would be something that you could do to even play with it a little bit more to get a design element that you haven't done before. So yeah, this is a beautiful book, and I'm going to be poring over it when I complete that hat. So the other thing that I have as a half-finished object is I was watching the Camabornia podcast, and of course that's a Swedish knitter that has a beautiful podcast, beautifully produced, and of course she's such a master of color work in her knitwear, that I thought I would use some of the patterns that I see her doing. And so I'm using gold and some other colors just in a fingering weight wool. I think it's a Norwegian wool that I'm using for these small flower mitts, and I've seen these many times before in other podcasts, but I thought I would like to try that. So I started out, and of course on Instagram, I think I maybe showed this on my last podcast, I had started doing it, but now I'm further along. So now really I just have to complete the thumbs and tie in some of my ends. So those are the fingerless mitts that I'm going to be hopefully wearing when I wear my Blacker yarn autumn leaves hat. So the two will go together. They're not quite the same ochre color. One is a little bit more gray, that being the Blacker yarn, but I think it'll be close enough that you'll be able to see that they're similar. So I'm quite happy with those. I didn't follow the pattern directly because one modification I made inadvertently was that I did a 2x2 stitch. It's almost like autopilot, you know, when you get doing your rib stitch sometimes, and you think to yourself, oh, my hands know how to do this, and lo and behold, I look back at the pattern, and it was a 3x1, I think, rib stitch that I hadn't followed the pattern for. But I don't think in the long run it's going to matter so much. So same thing down here. It should have been a 3x1 as well. So I'm quite happy with that. Color work is so great, isn't it? You can use up little scraps, you know, like these flower motifs. They barely used any yarn at all, and think of the lovely combinations you could get with just stash that hasn't been used up but you'd like to use. So that's that. Now I was going to also show you some spinning in progress that I had done. This is, I hope I brought the original bag. Yes, okay. So this was actually some old stash in my fiber stash, because I have so much and I'm trying to now really be conscientious about trying to use it all, as everybody is, I know, but I am making a hole in some of my old stash. For instance, this was old stash, and this was old stash that was not colored yet, so I am making some progress. And this is Merino Tencel Alpaca 40-40-20 that I had purchased at the Black Lamb. The Black Lamb was in Port Hope, Ontario. I don't know if it's still there. Somebody should message me and let me know if it is still there. I don't go there very often these days, but she had quite a variety of fiber and yarn that you could choose from. So I'm just making a single ply, but I just love the variation of the color in that. Again, what is it reminiscent of for me is the Gentle Knitter's choices of yarn color. And I guess I'm fangirling her choices, but she makes it seem so appealing. And this was sort of reminiscent to me of a blue jean indigo color that I really quite liked it. So the only thing about this fiber that I don't really like, let's see here if I can find the end, here we go, is that the staple length is relatively short. And so I find myself having to really shorten up. That's about the length of it you're going to get. And maybe an inch and a half. Yeah. So I find that, you know, it's not a relaxing spin in that it's not forgiving if you don't get your yarn tension or your fiber tension just quite right. You may lose your ends. So I find it's not as relaxing as I would like it to be, but I have quite a bit of it, so I'm expecting, how much was that? That was 110 grams. So I should be able to maybe match that up. Maybe I'll even match it with this gray, as a matter of fact. Kind of does, like, they seem to like each other. So maybe what I'll do is get that spun up and try to maybe incorporate it into the border of a shawl that I end up doing. So that's very good. And as I'm completing some of the things that I had wanted to in my stash and some of the patterns that I had kind of let go and I'm now resuming knitting on, I'm looking in my deep stash and trying to find patterns that I could perhaps use that stash for. And given that I am going to the UK, to Edinburgh, coming up in March, I thought, well, I'll probably be meeting quite a few of the people that I've been watching so avidly in other podcasts. And I just thought maybe I would start to knit some of the lovely shawls that they do. And so I thought maybe what I've used is this Ancient Arts yarn that I had acquired quite a long time ago. It's 437 yards. So I thought, well, I'll make a nice shawl with some of that. And so trying to think of the podcaster now that has the series of shawls that she puts out. You're probably screaming it at me now. And use some of the yarns that I have to maybe make one of those shawls that I've seen her put forth. I should have written it down, but in my way I haven't written it down. Maybe it'll come to me later. This was also a pattern I was considering, and it's called Tide Pool. And that's a nice, easy shawl that I might consider doing as well with that colorway. So now, a couple of years ago, I had gone to New Brunswick, and for those of you who are Canadian, you may know of the yarn company Briggs & Little. They usually come to a lot of the yarn festivals that we host here in Canada, and they're located in New Brunswick, as I said. They put out a yarn that is a very workhorse type yarn, and so some of the wool that I've purchased there, some of the yarn, I've used for things that need to be quite durable, mitts, hats, even slippers. The last time I went to Briggs & Little, they had like a bargain bin almost, 100% pure wool, 4 ounces, made in Canada, and it was called odds and ends. Now, I don't really know what odds and ends is going to mean, whether there's lots of breaks in the yarn, and maybe I'll have to land on my feet a little about how I use it in the light of that being a possibility. But it's just such a lovely oatmeal color that I thought I must be able to use this for a large project. Now, I've got 6 skeins of this yarn, and being odds and ends, it says 4 ounces, but it doesn't really give you the yardage. I could make a shawl out of it, but I'm thinking probably a shawl is only going to use up 2 of these skeins. Is there anybody out there that has used Briggs & Little, some of their, I would even call this maybe a DK worsted weight yarn? Is there anyone out there that has had good results using this for sweaters? Or should I just make a shawl and then try to maybe give it a bath with some hair conditioner to make it soften up a little? Give me your thoughts about what you think, and I'd love to hear them. This is quite rustic, but I did hear the gentle knitter saying that she's Canadian too, from I think the Ottawa area. Yes, Ottawa area. And she had used some of the Briggs & Little yarn in some of her projects, and she said she didn't mind the feeling of it, that it was rustic, but the projects worked out okay. So if anyone out there has used this, give me your thoughts about what your results were. I have bought several skeins of local yarn that are very rustic as well. So I have started some of those indoor slippers too. Many of you probably know it's just you knit, I think it's like an 8-inch square, 40 stitches, worsted weight, and then join it in the round for the toe and then sew up the heel. It's very easy. I can't remember the name. It is formalized in a pattern, but not coming to me at the moment. So yeah, so I have used some of the worsted weight hand spun or local yarn that I've acquired for that purpose, but again, that's way too much yarn to use for just that. I'll be knitting till doomsday on slippers if I just use it for that. So okay, I think that's pretty much all I have to show you at the moment. I wish I could remember the name of the podcaster that I was thinking of doing a shawl for when I get to Edinburgh Yarn Festival and I see her there. I want to make sure that I would acknowledge that receiving her patterns, that they were quite enjoyable to knit. So I can't see it at the moment. So oh well, I never said I was perfect, did I? So I hope that you're all having a great week and keeping warm wherever you are. And I will probably say goodbye for today. There's a rainbow in my background, and I hope that you'll have rainbows in your life. Okay, talk to you later. Bye bye.